for the Team Tech Naming Athletes to Unleash Their Best panel. We have a really good group of people that are much smarter than me, so I'm here to moderate and ask questions and listen to these experts and hopefully learn a few things myself. If you want to follow along through Twitter, the hashtag to use is #SportsConf. Send us your questions, and we'll try to incorporate those throughout our discussion. But we have three really impressive, very talented people to join us today to talk about tracking athletes and performance of athletes. We have Mounir from the U.S. Olympic Committee, Dr. Leslie Saxon from the USC Center of Body Computing, and Dr. Marcus Elliott from P3, and we'll hear from each of them. But I want to start out with you, Mounir. You have probably the most unique background of any of us on this call. You seem to be out in the field working with athletes. So let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, your role, and really for each of you, let's talk at first about what it is you do and how you use technology in training athletes, and really where is the state of training athletes today, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the future. But let's start with today and start with you, Mounir.
Sure, Brian. Thanks for having me. What I do at the Olympic Committee is lead the sports technology group, where we really work with athletes. You can see some here in the background, and our responsibility is helping them understand how their body behaves under different situations, and also help the coaches be in a position where they can make use of data to make wiser decisions. The current state of technology is I want to say awesome. I'm a big fan of wearable tech. I've been working in wearable tech for the past 15 years, I want to say, even before it was called wearable technology. And whereas today, I can sit in front of everyone on the track using my smartphone and live broadcast it over the world, I would not have been able to do this even 2 or 3 years ago. In the past, we used to worry about, how can we collect data from athletes in an open environment? How can we not have to ask them to come into standardized sports science labs and do the testing there? Today, we don't even worry about that anymore. We take it for granted that we can measure what these athletes are doing. And the challenge is now, how do we translate all of these numbers that we can measure into information that are actionable on the field?
Great. No, and so Mounir, what are you out there doing today?
Well, I'm here in sunny California, in San Diego. I'm at our Olympic Training Center, working with a bunch of our summer sport athletes, mainly track and field and rowing. I can't reveal much. You can appreciate that, but the aim is, how can we help these guys understand better what's going on with their bodies, and how can we help the coaches make decisions through technology?
Sure. And now, Dr. Saxon, so you've been working with a number of athletes and obviously have a bit of a different background, being a cardiologist and coming from the medical field. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing over the last few years and working more specifically with athletes, and where you see the state of technology in tracking athletes today.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm an interventional cardiologist who my specialty is called electrophysiology, so I deal with heart rhythm disorders, and have always been interested in the issue of athletic sudden death, which is a catastrophe, obviously, but became very interested through my work in planning devices that measure all sorts of big data from the heart, how to take wearable sensors, apply them to athletes to prevent injury and enhance performance. So I come to, and I have a digital health innovation center called the Center for Body Computing that tries to use the ruthless efficiency of digital to help improve patient performance, resilience, education. And a lot of those same principles apply to athletes. So what we do is we look at data and we try to understand from a very athlete-centric perspective, although obviously it's a village around an athlete, particularly an elite athlete, right? It's the athlete, the trainers, the coaches, the teams, the leagues, whatever. But we take a very athlete-centered approach and say, how do we help this athlete stay healthy and enhance their performance for as long as possible? And so that's a big data problem. You have various people on this chat that approach that in different ways. So that's training, a lot of the work that Dr. Elliott does, and breaking that down and making that a science. That's what the athlete's doing when they're not training, right? That's gameplay. Yeah. So there are lots of different constituents. There are lots of different aspects of this. There are lots of different data feeds, and a lot of intelligence, artificial and otherwise, that needs to work on the solution. So I would say that we're in very early days. For me, I think this field really needs some governing principles that focus on the athlete's interests and are able to help enhance their health and performance. And it's just incredibly early and very exciting, the work that's being done, and nobody's got it figured out at all.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's obviously part of the exciting part of things. Over to you, Dr. Elliott. So maybe for those that don't know, Dr. Elliott's been working with athletes for a number of years, most recently focused with basketball and NBA athletes. I had a great profile on you earlier this year in Sports Illustrated, some of the work you do, but maybe tell some of the group about what it is that you and P3 have been doing and where you see the current state of things today.
So thanks, Brian. Yeah, so essentially what we do is we can about athlete movement, athlete systems, and establish these really deep databases in each of the sports we work in, and then use that to the athlete's advantage. Use it for injury modeling, use it for performance modeling, use it for development targets. That's kind of the short view, but we really use any technology that we think might serve us, and are focused right now considerably on understanding individual athlete biomechanics, understanding predisposition to injury, seeing how plastic these different predispositions to injury are, and starting to harvest this database that we've established in each of these sports, but especially in basketball. I think that's our most compelling case in the NBA right now. Use this database to get big insight into how to keep athletes safe. What different movement patterns correlate with longevity in the NBA, with different performance. Small view of every system that the athlete has, and use that for the to the advantage of the athlete. That's essentially what we do at our shop.
Sure. Now, obviously, you're focused on basketball. You've worked with several other sports. I'll go around and ask everybody this question. What we do at Catapult, we work with a number of different sports, and we see some sports are farther along in the overall performance management sports science space. Are there sports you think have a lead in this space versus those that are still learning from the basics? And obviously, Marcus, you work a lot with basketball. Where do you see them on that spectrum?
Well, we came from working in football, working with the Patriots and doing research for the NFL, and then I was also the first director of sports science in Major League Baseball. So I've run through most of our major sports, and I think that the development model in basketball is the most immature. There isn't a dominant development paradigm. We don't know. Nobody thinks that they really understand how to build basketball players, and so I think that gives it more plasticity than the other sports. It feels like the NBA is moving faster than some of the other sports, but they're probably also coming from a little bit further back in terms of injury prevention and performance metrics from a data side.
Sure. Dr. Saxon, you work with a number of different sports and athletes at USC. What do you think in terms of sports?
They have their own dominant paradigms, and they don't cross over that well. Sometimes the athletes from each sport are like oil and water, and same thing with coaches. So I think my instinct is that basketball has the most plasticity, and it may be moving the quickest in this space, and it might just be because I feel like we're
I don't know if we lost him or if he's just stuck. I'll try to move on. Maybe he'll pop back in. Dr. Saxon, I'm starting to ask. You work with a lot of different athletes at USC, a lot of different sports. What do you think in terms of the spectrum of where each of the sports are? Are there any that strike out at you that are really advanced? Those that are farther behind?
Yeah, I mean it's always a complicated equation anywhere, but we've had some interesting observations I think we've been able to make in soccer, trying to understand how much work soccer players are really doing leading up to a game to alter training paradigms, etc., to optimize players for games using body-worn sensors. Mm-hmm. Football is so incredibly complicated to me for a lot of different reasons. I think I heard one of your guys, Brian, talk about how he likes to divide it into 9 different sports. That helps him think about how to quantify the football problem. But but obviously a lot of room for growth there in terms of injury prevention. And what I love about basketball is I love the game, first of all, but the way that, businesses that you've been involved in, the different data feeds that will allow you to make really intelligent decisions, both on player performance, injury prevention, and resilience and training, because when you have things like the cameras that are in basketball venues giving you one data feed, when you're tracking injury, like the NBA does and all players in every game, you've got the ability to take this data together and really make important and accurate observations that are league-wide, team-wide, and then will benefit the athlete themselves. So the NBA just feels like it's the perfect time to start making some breakthrough observations for all those constituents. So for that reason, because there are so many feeds going to one place, there's the opportunity in the NBA right now to really bring this data together and mash it up and make observations.
Sure.
For instance, I could imagine a day where you wouldn't just be judging. Tom does a lot of this really brilliantly on ESPN. Why does Derrick Rose score most in the fourth quarter using data analytics? What's happening with Blake Griffin? Why is he having so many assists for a big guy? Things like that. Well, you could take that data, you could take injury data, you could judge players, you could judge strength and conditioning coaches and coaches on their injury data. Maybe it's something about their training. Suddenly you build up this ecosystem where these observations are so rich that they're really benefiting everybody, including potentially, the fan experience. So I believe in multiple feeds and then being able to apply some intelligence to that. So I see basketball in that way as being teed up pretty well.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, having worked on basketball technology, now working with a lot of sports, I'd certainly agree with both of you. Mounir, obviously you work with a lot of different athletes, a lot of different sports. Are there any that jump out that are more advanced or farther behind to you?
See, the advantage of working with the Olympic Committee is that we really work with over 40 sports. If you throw in there summer, winter, and then you add the Olympics and Paralympic side, that puts us in a unique position, which we could not only understand the different needs coming out from different sports, but also maximize any kind of work that we're doing with one sport. There's lots of crossover lessons to be learned there. Having also this opportunity, I would say that our sports span the whole range of technology culture. Some sports are more open to using technology, others are not, due to the history and background of these sports. I believe that what people need to know is that we are in a position where we can literally collect data on any athlete in almost any environment. So think about these athletes who I have here behind me. Now, as we were working towards the London Games, we had very limited opportunities in terms of measuring data in an exterior situation like this one. Now that we're working towards Rio, the limitation has somehow faded away, and we are in a much better position today. Thanks to the wearable technology sort of buzzword that has been going on for the past 2 years, also that has helped our sports and our coaches and our athletes become more comfortable in talking about this language. The funny thing is that when we find that most of the times the science is ready, the technology is ready, and one of the challenges would be, how do you spread that knowledge to as many coaches and as many athletes as you can? And this is where the communication and the media today is helping us a lot in terms of spreading the word, helping people who are very expert in sports don't necessarily understand what a wearable technology piece is, be comfortable talking about this and be comfortable accommodating that approach in training. So as we move forward, I believe that we will see many more situations where we have data-driven training, data-driven decision-making, objective-oriented technology deployment on the fields, and it's definitely exciting.
Yeah, well, obviously at Catapult we see that, to your point about the technology science being ready, and it's really education into the marketplace for people that haven't used that, and people that, obviously the three of you are believers and have been doing it for years. There are others that are new to the overall industry of sports science. What does it mean? So we have a lot of those basic education type of conversations. We're just trying to say, what is this sensor technology? What does it capture? How does it can be used? And so each of the sports are different, but it also, to your point, Mounir, it really has to do with the users and the sport and the acceptance of that type of technology. You know, one of the drivers for us has been football, American football in this sport. I know, Leslie, you've worked with the USC football team and other football players a lot with a lot of different technologies. You know, what is it about the sport, the football, that really steps out to you as it relates to the performance aspects of what we work on today?
Oh, well, there are so many things that are exciting, present exciting challenges, but number one, just the difference in the athletes and their different jobs on the field. But I think even early days you can make a difference with just careful observation. For instance, the last combine training, we had 15 hopefuls. A number of them got drafted, but just trying to work on something as archaic and iconic as the 40-yard dash, where you have a difference between maybe a $5 million player or $20 million player. We decided on that one drill. So we were able to just, you know, break that down to a 10-yard split time, first and second step, how to improve an athlete in that area using cameras and body-worn sensors. But I think we added value to each and every one of the athletes, regardless of position, as complicated as that was, by being able to break down the performance to that, you know, the G-forces on the athlete and the effect on heart rate within that 10-yard split time. That's specific. But we felt that we added some value to those experts who are on the field with those elite athletes. And that's, you know, that's pretty gratifying. So I think it'll be baby steps like that that will ultimately, you know, culminate in more generalizable observations.
Sure. Now, and Dr. Elliott, I can't tell if you're still with us or not. Can you hear me? Well, I was going to ask him this question. Maybe, Leslie, I'll come back to you with it. You know, when you're dealing with, oh, Dr. Elliott, you back?
Yeah, sorry, Brian.
No worries. What I was going to ask is, you know, when we talk about technology, it's very easy for us to say, oh, yeah, well, it's technology, the athletes will do it. When you're dealing directly with the athlete, guys that are playing their craft, that are playing their sport, a lot of time professional sports, and you're asking them to use technology in different ways, tell us a little bit about your direct interaction with athletes. How open are they to it? How do you get them to see the benefits of something that might be counter to what they've done in the past? You know, just that direct interaction with athletes, I don't think most people get a chance to learn a bit more about. So maybe you could tell us more about your interaction with the athletes themselves. You dropped.
I got you, Brian.
Okay, you're good.
Listen, in my experience, athletes are usually pretty interested in themselves, and so if you can give them insight into themselves, how they work, why this left knee is hurting them, why they're not as good moving to the left as they'd like to be, why they get beaten when they're moving to the left on the court. When you can give them insight into those type of things that are tangible to them, then you get big buy-in. The hardest thing, and everybody touched on this, I think the hardest thing in this space is to have one leg where the rubber meets the road, where the athlete really lives, and on the training side, on the coaching side, and one foot firmly in the sports science world. It's very difficult to do both of those. But in my experience, the athletes are not that open to working in a technology or data space that they don't really understand. That it's not tangible to them. You know, and I'm sure everybody on the panel has had that experience before. But I think that, you know, we've focused a lot of our attention on understanding athlete small picture biomechanics now, and to be able to sit back with an athlete and show him how he lands with 30% more force on his left side every time he comes down, that's meaningful to him, and they can say, yeah, this left side has been giving me trouble the last 2 years, and maybe this is a solution. And so in that area, we get a whole lot of buy-in. We've had more trouble with the things that are a step removed, like looking at studying EEG, looking at brain function in our athletes. It's just a little too to the athlete, and I need to be practical. I need to be able to apply it. I need to be able to make this athlete's life better today, and this is our approach.
Sure. Dr. Saxon, you work with a lot of athletes directly, more on the college side than maybe professional. Do you have the same experience, or are they a little bit more open to working with technology?
I feel like it's a great question. They're a lot of fun. They're very competitive, so we try to play on that. We try to create things that will set up a competition immediately. Then they tend to buy in. But I think they'll let you do, my experience is they'll let you do anything to them, particularly the pros if they think it will make them competitive. But they get bored quickly if you can't add value.
Sure.
So, you know, it's not enough to say, oh my God, you're in amazing shape and he might be slightly better on that thing. You have to really add value. And the problem I have on the mechanics side a little bit in both the collegiate and the other athletes is you may be able to see that the mechanics are off, but changing them when they're fixed it's also, you know, Tiger Woods, how many times has he changed his swing, whatever. It's not that easy to change mechanics, even though it may be in your best interest. I think that's at least a challenge. And on the biometric side, it's early days. We're really collecting data to then be able to train people better. So, you know, sometimes it's counterintuitive. You have to tell a tennis player, look, if you're getting older, you have to decondition and maybe hit less tennis balls to get more flexibility or strength that'll keep you into those long matches because your hip hurts or whatever. Sometimes, you know, you're telling athletes things that are counterintuitive for them, for what they've grown up learning how to train in a certain way. So that's another piece that's kind of interesting, but I think they have to see the payoff.
Yeah, well, and then we say that a lot in the balance of it's one thing just to say you have an interesting technology that can capture something, but to show those results is always very important. And whether that be the athlete themselves or the organization writing a check for that technology, I mean, the results are obviously what we're all measured on. And so it's how do you guys balance? And maybe I'll go to you with this, Mounir, because I'm sure you get a lot of technologies approaching you to try new things on your athletes. How do you balance new technology out there that's unproven with something that you know that you could use and get results from?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. The you know what differentiates Olympic athletes from any other athlete, that they are on a non-stop calendar for their whole Olympic life cycle. You know, they have ongoing world championships, World Cup. Some of them have got college programs. And one of the biggest challenges that we run into is how do you keep these athletes healthy? You know, how do you keep them performing? How do you have a human body performing, you know, on a continuous cycle, non-stop? As you said, we have lots of companies approaching us of proactive work in terms of reaching out to companies, and we see our sports sitting sort of in a sweet spot that is not satisfied by a product that is available for consumers. Sometimes it could be satisfied by a product or a technology that is dedicated for professional sports, but most of the time it's personalizing and customizing any kind of technology. We are always on the lookout to different sectors on the market. You know, we talk with the medical market, we talk a lot with the industrial market, with the research, of course, and we try to combine the players who we need around the athletes. Most of the times, you have to touch upon, you know, how do you get an athlete on board? How do you get a coach on board? We have learned lots and lots of invaluable lessons from the design thinking world and the human-centered design world. Now, it's these are topics that have been demonstrated to work in the design industry and in the international industry. You know, any big company who is looking to launch a consumer product would have had some kind of interaction with this, with these two terms. And as I said, we are discovering that specifically design thinking is what will help us make a difference. It helps us put ourselves in the shoes of, you know, of our athletes and our coaches, and begin asking ourselves, you know, how can we influence these guys? How can we help them accommodate any kind of technology or any kind of data that we can provide them with into their training sessions? You know, athletes are athletes, coaches are coaches, and this is what they need to be focused on. Anything that can distract that is not contributing, even if it has cutting-edge science behind it, right? So finding equilibrium is usually what helps us find that 1% advantage that then translates into the difference between going back home with a gold medal around your neck or going back home empty-handed.
Right. Yeah, and it goes back to those results. You know, you touched a little bit, Mounir, on what's coming in the future and where things are headed. What type of technologies do you see, you know, athlete wearable tracking going over the next few years, and both where do you see it going, where would you like it to go?
As you have guessed, I'm a big fan of wearable technology. And I strongly believe that wearable tech will change the sports forever. It's going to open up new avenues that we have never even imagined before. Right now, the industry is focused mainly on activity-oriented wearable, like wearable tech that would tell you, how many steps you took, or how many calories you burned, or what was your, foot contact time if you're running left versus right, and so on. I see that lots of cutting-edge research coming out of universities around the world is looking at physiological sensors right now. Yesterday I was visiting a local university here in California, and they're working on, electronic tattoos. They're working on stickers that once you put on your body certain locations, those, thanks to the sensors that they have embedded inside them, they could, provide us with data that we can get today by doing a blood analysis. We cannot get it on the field in a situation like the one that I'm immersed in right now. I believe that the sports world will see lots and lots of technology coming from two specific sectors. One of them is wearable tech, like I had mentioned so far. The other one is thanks to the work that is done in the mobile communication industry. Again, I would not have been able to sit on a track field in California and be with you guys 3-4 years ago because the internet capabilities weren't there. Right today, I can do this. 2-3 years from now, I can't even imagine what it would be like. It's changing quickly. In one of the recent conversations that I was having with one of the leading international mobile communication companies, they were already talking about the 5G network and how very soon coaches, athletes, fans in venues would be able to watch on their screens 3D videos that are captured by multiple devices all around the same venue. So imagine having, like all of our coaches distributed around this track behind me, and I would be able to see on this specific device that I'm talking on, the views coming in from all of these devices combined. So that I can drill deep into a certain technique. I can zoom out and look at a team strategy. It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, no, it sounds like. I think we're all, I think we're all big fans of where wearables are today. Obviously, I'm slightly biased in that conversation myself, but certainly the future is exciting too, about how you can integrate various different technologies, and really what people don't always think about with wearables is it's going to increasingly not be about the device or the hardware or the collection. It's going to be about what you do with the data. That's what it always comes down to. It all starts with collecting it, but then where that data goes and how you use it is next. Marcus, while we have you, I know you keep cutting in and out a little bit, but what are your thoughts on kind of where you see athlete technology going in the future, whether that be in training sessions in labs or in the games themselves? And if you wouldn't mind scooting a little bit to your right, I think you're cut off a little bit on the screen. There you go. So I'll hand it over to you on where you see the future.
Well, what you just said is absolutely true. It's like we're still at a state where we can start collecting a lot of data, but what are you going to do with it? How do we make that functional? And we're at a state where we're trying to figure out where that functionality is still. I think the next stage is to take the existing technologies and make this more functional. We really almost every week or two we get somebody in our shop that can be a franchise player, and we find a significant red flag or a significant movement pathology that is actionable, and to me that's a nice place for us to live. What I'd like to be able to do though is be more seamless in integrating some of the stuff that we're doing in a lab environment with what's happening on the field. And you and I have talked about this, about integrating some of these injury projections or injury risk projections we put together in sport with load data. To me, that's a super valuable place to live. I mean, we published a big paper in the NFL where our denominator, when we're looking at injury risk, is exposures. And exposures was defined as just any team activity. We have to be able to do a lot better than that. I'd like to be able to look at how vertical loads are, when combined with a certain movement pathology, lead to injury risk, or how some of these lateral plane loads or overall loads affect injury risk given certain pathologies. And I expect that your group, Brian, and ours will probably end up doing some work together in the future, because we need in our world we need better denominators for our injury risks.
Yeah, no, I agree, and obviously, it's. I know I didn't respond to your email from yesterday. We'll definitely get on that because it's exciting, especially for me coming from a background of working a lot with basketball and what we said earlier. I think basketball is a really interesting sport in what you're able to do in your lab and in training, and then be able to then go compare that to what they're doing when they're out there playing on the court. And to us, the combination of what's going on in certain environments, what goes on in practice, and then what goes on in the game is really where an element of what could be done right now. As we start going forward, Dr. Saxon, turn it over to you because I know you're always on the cutting edge of technologies out there. You're looking at different things. You've been doing this for years. Where do you see this going over the next few years, and what's most interesting to you as it relates to the wearables technology or just athlete technology in general?
Yeah, as I look at sort of the problem we have is that somebody's really looking at mechanics, someone else is looking at physiologic data, and it's not just what happens in the game or in training, it's how much the athlete has had to drink or eat, their travel schedule. That's a labor issue right now in the NBA. So you really need the everything to be able to take all these structured and unstructured data feeds into some kind of intelligence to be able to predict things. So I think that implantables are very attractive in that regard. Imagine being able to say to an athlete, because form factor is also an issue for some sports, right? Imagine being able to say to an athlete, depending on where I put the sensor, implant it, very small incision, 2 years, wireless, we get the everything. Once you have the everything, it doesn't take a whole lot of data collection. I mean, maybe heart and respiratory rate or temperature or some of these things are great surrogates for mechanical load. We don't know that, right? But we'll find that out. The bigger the data you have and the more feed, better. So the concept of wireless implantables, I think they're upon us. As a cardiologist, we're already putting in devices like that you could put in other parts of the body and immediately morph to an athletic application.
Right. Now that brings up a very good point. A good question is, we're collecting all this data from athletes, from individuals. How do you manage where that data goes? Who gets access to it? What goes to the athlete? What goes to the individual? I mean, I know this is, coming from a medical field, that's obviously a very important part of what you've always done. Like, how do you see that developing? Because the more that we collect this type of information from individuals, we start to get into some interesting areas of who owns that data, where does it go? I'm sure you're right in the middle of that all the time. How do you see that evolving over the next few years?
It's a great question. I think it's kind of gone wrong in patient care. It's been asked backwards because what we've always done is kept data from patients. The doctors have it, the providers have it, and it's their data, it's from their body, and so now that's completely reversing, and patients are consumers and they want their data. So in the athletic space, I think the earlier that they're enfranchised and trust is built and governance is established, whether it's in a team or a league setting, so that players feel and have the trust that their best interest is going to be served, that's just an important dialogue to have, to enfranchise them early and not to sequester them or hide their data from them, or to just at least start to develop the governance around it with the players at the table. That feels very important to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a lot of things you see, data breaches and everything with any kind of information. It's something it's a global issue and a global problem for everybody. But when you're talking about this type of data collection, you get into biometrics and that kind of data, it gets pretty important, and something that needs to be decided up front, not something you can decide when you're halfway into it, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's never paid off not to be able to give patients their data. They deserve it. They own it. They actually own it, even from an implantable device. So how that will play out in sports is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Mounir, going to throw it over to you. When you talk about one of the things that we see happening is the ability to, you said earlier, the science is there, the science to track athletes while they're playing their sport, to have that real-time data to a coach on the sideline or as they're watching their athlete play. That exists today. The question is, will we ever get to the point where coaches will utilize that type of information in real time, or will it always be after the fact?
It depends from situation to situation. You know, in my case, working with lots of Olympic and Paralympic sports, there are some critical key performance indicators that a coach needs to have real time to make a good decision. In many other situations, however, real-time information represents a distraction, and it does not help the coach. So the real question would be, you know, what does a coach need? What does an athlete need in real time? And what do they need after the fact? Most of the cases, well, sometimes we see that even though we're collecting tons and tons of data and tons of information on them, whether it's biomechanical, strategic, or physiological, they might be interested in getting just, you know, one indicator on whether, you know, whether they can instruct their athletes to push a bit more during training or hold back. And then once they're done with the training session back in the office, they will look at the whole training session and how that went, and begin comparing it to past performance, and, you know, building knowledge that would eventually help them make a wiser decision. But finding the right equilibrium is really challenging, and you know, in our case, I would say it's even more challenging because we have multiple sports and we have lots of events that take place out of the country. You know, so then how do you handle travel? How do you handle jet lag? How do you handle sleep? How do you handle, you know, how do you optimize preparation for any kind of competition?
Well, and it's interesting because coming from the world where we're the technology provider, you know, certainly when we have those conversations, we acknowledge that the coaching aspect of it is both a science and an art. And while the data is available in real time, to your point, Mounir, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to use it or it's appropriate to use it. Sometimes it is just noise. There might be easy things you can do while the athlete is training or while they're in their play, but more you do after the fact. You know, what's interesting, I was at the NBA Technology Summit this past weekend, and they had an analytics panel with Charles Barkley and Mark Cuban, and, you know, kind of both sides of the story about how you use information, and the debate was really about how do you use analytics? Is it good? Is it bad? And there's certain parts where they still put it in that camp of you either use data or you use coaching, and it's not meant to be one or the other. It's meant to be both. At no point is anyone thinking that data is going to override the power and the art of what good coaching does, or vice versa. So it's working together in harmony, and I think that exists regardless. And then when you start talking about data in real time, and that's where it gets even more interesting, is how and what do you use to make the impact? Because, as you said, as it relates to gold medals versus not getting a medal, I mean, that's the difference you're trying to build towards, and that's not about what happens in that event. It happens in the years that builds up towards that. But there's a lot that goes into that discussion. You know, Leslie, you've talked about dealing with the soccer program, and there's different sports where real-time data is more relevant than others. For sports like soccer, where you can actually make some substitution decisions based on this type of data, have you gotten into discussions with the coaching staffs about what could be used in real time versus not, and how you balance that?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways it can be used. You can use it, you know, even for team politics to help tell a player why they're not playing, you know, show them, objectify the data. But you're right, this idea that we need great decision support that has to be intelligent, because these guys are already experts at what they do. So you have to bring in added value with decision support tools that are accurate. When I hear Sir Charles embark on his diatribe of why analytics ruin basketball, as best I can understand what he's saying, he thinks the analytics that he's seen so far haven't told the whole story of what's going on in the court, that there are other things going on, that analytics are deceiving. They don't, but, you know, in some cases they're not. They show the value of an unappreciated player or something like that. So the more accurate they can be, the more intelligent these decision support tools can be, and then, you know, the coach can decide what's useful to him. I can tell you, as a doctor, if you can take away the stuff that I do that's repetitive, that I don't need to do, so I can focus my brain, my time on those things that I'm really needed for, where I'm really expert in, you can take away the repetitive aspects of my job, that's a good thing. So I think that should be a similar goal, to take some of the drudgery away from coaching or strength and conditioning, and add value through decision support, so the experts are really focusing on those things that are going to add value.
Yeah, and that's obviously, you know, if there's a theme of this conference, it's, hey, technologies, or this panel, technology is great, but it all comes back to adding value, right, and moving things in the right direction, helping athletes to improve. You know, Dr. Elliott, you kind of jumped in and out. What we're talking about is the ability to use data in real time, whether that's valuable, how you use that from a coaching standpoint. obviously what you're doing with athletes is not necessarily when they're out there in the game. How do you see that dynamic between what you're able to show them versus how they might be able to use some data real time or not? I lost him again. I was trying one last time. All right.
Hey, Brian.
There you go. Gotcha.
Hey, we're having system-wide connectivity problems.
Good timing for that. All right, we might have lost him again. Okay. Trying to get. All right, I just want to make sure he wasn't coming back before we started kind of wrapping this thing up. Just in the last 2 minutes we have, Mounir and Leslie, just kind of go back to you one last time. Start with you, Mounir. As you look at this overall market and what you do in sports science, if someone were to come and say, okay, tell me in 20 seconds why you do what you do. What is impactful about it? What's the point? But you only got 20 seconds. What's your answer?
I would say that in the Olympic sports, great coaches and great athletes are everywhere. We firmly believe that technology will play a very big and significant part in the medal count over the years to come. So that is why we cannot think of continuing to work in sports without using technology.
Right. Yeah, you got the medals out there. That's probably the best answer there is. The ultimate measurement. Dr. Saxon, how about you? If someone were to say, hey, all this crazy stuff, center body computing, what's the point? Why do you do all this?
I'd say it's not science fiction, it's science fact. And people in sports franchises, athletes need to start collecting data on athletes and performance and exposing that to big data analytics because it's the future. And we're in the learning phase. And so if you're behind on the learning and you're not collecting the data, you're going to be really behind as this stuff matures. I think it's just the cost of doing business, and it will create enormous new revenue streams and athletic longevity that are be completely unexpected. There'll be some unintended consequences too that aren't so great, but the earlier we get the learning and the more mature and competitive the individual athlete and the team or league will be.
Great. Well, as we wrap it up, I just want to thank Dr. Saxon, Mounir, Dr. Elliott for when he was able to join us. Appreciate your guys' time and for dialing in. Obviously, a huge respect for each of you as individuals and what you're doing, and look forward to working with each of you as we continue to push athlete technology and performance to the next level. So thanks to each of you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.